Today's show is going to be, have I ever had failures or mistakes? And the answer to that is yes, of course I have. This is episode 87. Mary came across a friend a few days ago who had some feedback and some critique because this person, I guess, is or has been involved with helping produce podcasts in the past, and so had some helpful pointers and critiques that I could take advantage of. And here's the thing. When somebody wants to offer you their thoughts and opinions about what you're doing, sometimes our first reaction is to put our hand up and or this knee-jerk reaction to be defensive and start questioning the legitimacy of what their suggestions are. Once I got past that moment, because I sort of did have that moment, I really did consider what this person had to say, and I think it opened my eyes a little bit more to possibilities where this thing could go and the reach it might have. Coming up from a guy that's laughing and carrying on every Tuesday morning. Suggestions were, is this really a podcast or is it a live stream? I guess technically it's a live stream. I've been calling it a podcast, but it's a live stream. And I like that I try to make it interactive with those watching and chiming in, and like this morning, for example, suddenly connecting with Tony, who is a drummer or was a touring drummer from Michigan. I had toured with a band called Pull from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Marquette. When I left that band, Tony took my spot. Sean says, tomato, tomato. Yes. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Keeping it interactive allows for moments like that to happen to Tony to pop on here and go, hey, man, great to see you over the internet. And now I might see him in the next couple days or so. And it's been a long, long time. So it'd be great to catch up. So that's one of those benefits from, I think, it being interactive. And I think it helps direct the conversation a little bit too. Now, I'm not opposed to a different format, but it's something to consider from this person. One of the criticisms, and this is largely due to the producer, is that when I would take a drink of my coffee, I guess I was loud in doing that. They could hear the ice in the drink, and then I would take a drink and I'd go, like over-exaggerating the cool, refreshing drink of my iced coffee. And so that's why when I took a drink, I was trying to be quiet. So let's see if I can be quiet. So I would just take a drink, right? And they could hear those noises, and those noises supposedly drove them crazy. Now, to me, I was just like, I just took a drink of coffee. Sean says most podcasts or live streams don't make it past 5 episodes. I see episode 87 in your title. Great. Yeah. Yes, 87 weeks in a row, Sean. Minus one. 6 months ago to the day today is when my mom passed away, and that was on a Tuesday, February 6th. We knew we were losing her, and anybody that's followed that story, that morning we knew that she was going to pass away within a few hours, and so I did not. That's the only week that I've missed, and for good reason, obviously. I don't know. I might get 30-some to 50-some people watching live as it happens, or people will kind of come and go. Then I have a lot of people that will watch the replay, and so by the time that whole week cycles, I have between 400 and 500 people that have watched it at least halfway through. And now it's an hour long, so somebody to watch for that long, and it depends on what the subject matter is too. Sometimes the topics are a little sensitive, like you're kind of poking the bear a little bit, and so then I'll, of course, attract more people by my infinite wisdom. So, at any rate, besides getting hung up over if this is a podcast or a live stream, it's like Sean said, tomato, tomato. Look, I'm a mouth breather. Everybody knows this. I don't know why. When I was in the 8th grade, it was the end of the school year. Loved riding BMX bikes. I didn't race, but I loved riding BMX bikes. And my friends, any of us who were pretty active kids from, the mid 70s. And then I graduated in 1990. So BMX bikes were a big thing. And we had a vacant lot across the street from our house when we lived in town. And I say in town, it was the edge of town, at least at that time. And we built jumps and things. And I went off a jump, and the whole front of my bike came apart. And all I had in my hands were the handlebars. Anyway, I busted my nose and my jaw and my teeth and really messed up my face. And part of it is that's why my nose kind of looks like this. But so when that happened, this whole thing on the inside of my mouth was torn away from my jaw, and I split out the side of my cheek, and so all of this came down under here, and my jawbone was exposed, and I knocked all my teeth loose, and I bit part of my tongue off, which is about the size of a 50-cent piece, and that had to be re-sewn back on. And so, I really, my mouth and my airway through my nose and stuff really was torn up. After I graduated high school, I had surgery on my nose to improve my airway. But so ever since then, I've been a loud breather. I think that's part of why I have sort of a nasally tone to my voice, is because none of that is how it should be. It's all been repaired, so to speak. From the time of that accident to after I graduated high school, I couldn't breathe through my nose at all because everything was so damaged. I would speak, and then I'd have to pause to breathe, or I would be eating and have to pause to breathe, and all of those kind of things. And anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I think that's what caused these noises I make that drive my wife absolutely insane. So there was that. The other thing was, when I get on here and talk, this critique was everything seems to go my way and everything's great and everything just works out for me. Not really. I think where I'm currently sitting today at this very moment was a process leading to the life I have right now, which I get excited about and I'm thankful for, and I've had I got the right people involved, that I connected with that helped me think of things in a different way and to be able to move forward with my drumming career and actually have a career as a drummer. I've mentioned, teaching, recording, playing, those kind of things. Because I've paid attention and followed those instructions of those kind of people, I'm sitting where I am now. And so I think I get excited about that. And then I want to share that information with people and share the process of it because, I have other close friends who are musicians who go, well, if Fred can do it, I can do it too. Yeah, absolutely. Mary was talking about, well, you have all these things that you talked about of successes and things like that. And the other suggestion was to start having guests on. And that's been a kind of a request from a few people for a while. I'm hoping starting in January to at least have one guest a month come join me on here. And I know that I could stream live to Facebook and to my YouTube page. And so I have a plan that I'm putting together to make all that work. So it's not like I'm just suddenly going to do it. I have a plan. The other thing Mary said is you never share my failures or mistakes that I make. Well, there's two sides to that coin. One is I've made a lot of mistakes personally, and depending on what band I am, Midline probably being the number one example, is jointly making decisions about the band's future that didn't produce the kind of fruit that we were hoping for, that we dreamed of. So why is that? I think when things were super busy for the band, early mid 90s, having success on the radio and selling a lot of CDs, and the opening up for a lot of national bands, and in some cases being part of a short little stint of tours with different bands like Saliva and Breaking Benjamin and Motley Crue and things like that. We had a lot of momentum and things going for us, but we didn't involve the right people in our career that could really solidify what we were doing and to make a living doing that as well. So, I could talk for hours or probably days on the decision making that happened at that time. So what was available to us at that time? When you're younger, you have a younger mind, you don't have as many life experiences. And James says, you are a positive person. Mentioning mistakes or regrets is fine, but you don't need to focus on them. Yeah, I agree. Thank you, James. We all make mistakes in our lives, in a lot of different areas. Depending on how personal those mistakes or regrets or things might be, you don't necessarily want to advertise those to the world. I have plenty of friends and acquaintances and things, and even people I've never even met, who I'll see there's kind of a constant flow or stuff that they post, and a lot of it's so negative about stuff that's not going right in their life. I have things that don't go right in my life all the time too, but I don't think it's like James says, like, do I need to focus on that? No, I think you can acknowledge it, and then you have a choice, like, what were the circumstances on whatever this thing were, and how can I avoid that in the future, and things of that nature. So, really personal stuff, of course, I'm not going to post, something like that. We all have our challenges. So I think in general terms, like when you're younger, I kind of made like a very short list. You're not typically not business minded. That was a mistake that Midline was making, was not being business minded, or not business minded as a cohesive group. I always thought that there should have been some more accountability in the business side of that, and we were young, and it was all about rock and roll, and it was all just going to work out, and just let the universe decide. Turned out to be not such a good approach. So there's that. Being older, approaching this now from a more business perspective is one of those things I learned to just be Fred Fisher Incorporated. So much of what I've done and what has led to what's working for me is through the counsel and advice from Matt Starr, who now I've known for at least 10 years, maybe 11 or so. He's had such a huge influence on me, probably in more ways than he realizes. Younger, when we were growing up and getting started, and like the accessibility to resources were kind of scarce. So we would put physical packets together and mail those to record labels and to management companies and things, and radio stations, which I'm sure 90% of those wound up in the trash without ever being opened, and that's an unfortunate thing too. But it's like sending general mail, or being more business minded and being really specific on who we're sending this to, and that, more importantly, they're expecting to receive said package. Now, as older, we have easy access to so many resources through the internet, and finding people and connecting with those people are easier than they ever have been to reach people. Even if it's to find out the answer is no, it's really easy to get in touch with people. There's that, it comes back to that being business minded and being really intentional. So, and then being younger, not meeting the right people, not having the right contacts, these are all missed opportunities or mistakes or failures or regrets, even as James had mentioned. before. You know, being older and the resources of the internet, it's easy to find the right people. It's easier to connect with people and network with people. And these are relationships that you don't connect with somebody and just instantaneously something happens for you. It's a relationship that has to be built over time. Well, what happens when you build relationships with people over time? Trust becomes established. And you trust those people because you have a deeper connection with them, and they get to know you and you get to know them. Just like any relationship or friendship, as that grows, you know, then you could say, hey, you know, I don't have the answer to this, but maybe James Harrison does. You know, or any number of people. You know, I know a lot of people now, and I know what people's strengths are typically, and same with me. People can direct me in different ways. So a lot of good stuff as that happens. And then I guess closely connected to that is being younger is like your misdirected efforts or not having a plan. Just throwing it out there and assuming or hoping that it's all going to work out. Like hope isn't a plan. And then being older, learning from those mistakes and those different things that you had to navigate is now you can make more calculated efforts. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with the accessibility of information and being able to reach people easier. But having a plan has been such a key thing in what I'm currently doing and what I'm hoping to also continue to do and expand what I'm doing. So, you know, when Mary was saying, well, you never talk about your failures or mistakes that you made, sometimes those can be embarrassing too. You know, for us drummers out there, we have quite a bit of equipment that we're trying to keep track of so that you can do these gigs. So I've had some forgotten equipment before. And the reason for those things is there at one point several years ago, I was playing in 5 bands. I had 5 band commitments. And depending on which band I was playing in was depending on which equipment I was taking. And so sometimes I was taking stuff from this drum kit and merging it with this drum kit, or maybe I wasn't using a full kit. And so my equipment was just in this chaos of stuff. And in the midst of that chaos, there were a few times, and thankfully they were shows that were in town, I forgot to bring my hi-hat stand. So I get there to load in, and I don't have a hi-hat stand. Now, me posting that on the internet to me would be embarrassing. Like, doesn't feel very pro. So in a panic, I would call Mary and say, I forgot my hi-hat stand. And fortunately, she was in a position where she could grab it, knew what to grab, and she could be driving across town and I could be driving somewhere and meet her like at a halfway point or something. And so that kind of panic doesn't feel very good to do that. It's embarrassing. It's stressful because everything's timed and you want to be able to be on time. So that's, but yeah, it's being through that period of being unorganized and just in this chaos of stuff that happened like 3 different times. You'd think after the first time, you'd be like, oh, I'm never going to forget that again. One time in the chaos of stuff, we were going to, now anybody who's watching that's not in Boise, we have a lot of urban sprawl. And so getting from one end of the Treasure Valley to the other can take quite a bit of time anymore. Traffic is definitely heavy most all the time, everywhere. So it's distance-wise, it's not that far, but actually getting there is, could be 45 minutes to an hour. And I know those people in Los Angeles, that's, that same distance could be 2 hours. It's just nuts. At any rate, so you want to have a plan, you want to have a checklist, things like that, and try to have just try to have my life together, you know? So that'd be like equipment issues. Dealing with shady people, making sure that contracts happen, and then standing up for yourself. You know, I don't like being a doormat. So these are all these kind of little things that have happened throughout that were mistakes or failures or regrets. Leaving luggage behind, some piece of clothing, like, you know, leaving a jacket behind at a club, and now you're suddenly 400 miles away, and that it's like, you just say goodbye to that, or are you trying to get it back? Not everything goes to plan. Even if you have a plan, having a plan is a better option. But yeah, I've made plenty of mistakes. I've had plenty of failures. You know, personally, sometimes things in the music business can put a big strain on your relationship. You know, being a musician typically requires sacrificing a lot of other stuff that, you know, birthdays, holidays, things like that. Sometimes an opportunity comes along and you have to say no to this thing to say yes to this other thing. And it's, fortunately, I'm with a woman who does understand that. Sometimes it's still hard when that happens. And Mary's a musician too, and she has her band that she plays with. And as that band has become more popular, Casio Dreams, who's just like riding this wave of success right now, Mary too is having to say no to family things in order to play music. So that's probably a unique situation for us, and not everybody has that. So just navigating personal relationships can be definitely a challenge in how all of this works. When somebody wants to give you criticism or critique, first of all, recognizing that they're trying to help. I think it's important to remind yourself of that. So much of this is off the cuff. I'll write out notes so I have some kind of path to follow, but I don't want to be like 100% scripted. And that's why I like the interaction too, because sometimes that helps direct the conversation in ways that I didn't think it might go. And then I get people's thoughts and opinions too when they start weighing in. And James is one of those guys who frequently checks in and has great things to say. Greg typically has really great points, but so do other people. But those two seem to be pretty regular. Greg says it can be hard to talk about failures or perceived failures. Sometimes it isn't just embarrassing. Sometimes it's devastating. Yeah, depending on what that is, for sure. That because, you know, it happened to that person. Like if I'm sharing a failure or a mistake, that happened to me. Maybe I caused it for what, you know. There's a million different ways of things to go wrong, and then how we deal with those things. So, you know, we call that experience. We call that knowledge. We call that wisdom. Is the saying you can't have wisdom without knowledge and experience? Something along those lines. Thomas says a cool topic would be how your life on the road has gone while touring. Yeah, well, let me make a note. I'll make a note right now. Now here's the thing, because I'm so willing to share my opinions. Being on the road and touring to me is that you spend an extended time away from home. My first tour I was on, I was gone from home for 7 months, and we played 207 shows in that time. That was touring. Another tour that I was on, and this is the longest tour I've been on since I've been married, was for 3 months. And I was I think Mary and I had been married just over a year, and then I left on the road for 3 months. How many newlyweds let their spouse leave and go play music for 3 months? I don't know. Probably not many. But she's still here. So there's that. Life on the road as a single guy. That could easily be misinterpreted. I would say a single guy who's, who doesn't have responsibilities, doesn't have a mortgage and children and all that. Our financial commitments and our future perception is a lot different than when you are married. Or, when I've been gone on the road for a couple weeks and having a wife at home and children and a mortgage and those kind of things, it gets more and more challenging. Again, it comes back to that sacrifice thing. Like, you start weighing, is this important to my career? Is this important to the overall picture? Having that business mind is another key thing